Kaselionis. I'm a first-generation American-Lithuanian, but third-generation U.S. serviceman. This summer I'll celebrate 10 years with my wife, Kim, who's the former CEO of Circle Bank, and I have three stepchildren, a civil engineer, a second lieutenant in the Air Force, and a student in speech pathology. I started my first business when I was 12. I ran my first $1 million restaurant when I was 19. By the time I was 26, I was managing a $150 million contract with 1,500 employees. Now I'm 40. I've spent 8 years with FEMA and 15 with the Coast Guard Reserves. Where people up here will talk about leadership, I'm actually held to that leadership for protecting people and helping them at their worst times. I will lead the county away from regional boards to better support students, commuters, and the voters. I will champion the implementation of new ideas to make the county more accessible and actionable, and I will develop and execute plans to help and support the citizens of Marin, to include children, the elderly, and all the households in Marin. Somewhat interesting, I'm the only commuter up here, and I have for the last 13 years through the Bay Area, and I hear people pontificate about solutions for traffic which they know nothing about. Nothing in the fact that they're not commuters. Many of them travel from West Marin, and so they should be talking about that corridor. But when we're talking about the 101 corridor, the third lane of the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge does little to bring down, or will do little to bring down reduction of traffic in 101. And as Wendy had borrowed my idea, we do need to turn on the metering lights on 101. They were installed but never turned on. That's simply the $40 million that got given to SMART from TAM this year probably could have been used for that, and Caltrans could have turned those on. People don't carpool because Dominic doesn't carpool, but my vehicle got broken into last week at the carpool area. It's unsafe to keep our vehicles there now, and I've been a commuter for the last 8 years at that Vanpool site, and that same day, a vehicle was stolen and stripped and finally found the following day in Petaluma. So we have to make it safe for commuters to have these programs.
Tomas.
With over 15 responses around the country, working either for the Coast Guard or for FEMA, in 2011, and I'm just going to use this example, I went up to northern Alabama and worked with the Black and Hispanic communities that had been impacted by Category 5 and 4 tornadoes. They had lost power. I was up in that valley for over a week and a half, powerless, while they were trying to get the nuclear generation plant back online. That community, losing their homes, completely wiped off their foundations, all of their worldly belongings, required me to work with them and their community leaders to get them the things they needed, whether that was day-to-day food, cash stipends, clothing for their families, a safe place to come home to and their kids to play. I even worked with the community leader there that ran the youth center, and we actually used that as a base of operations to do one-on-one registration with each of the members there, because they would not commute to the major metropolitan city nearby where they had most of those registration stations. So I stayed with that community until they were served and my duty was done. I spent the last 4 years as an elected official on the Fire District Board of Directors. You may have seen that I filed 3 complaints against several of those directors for the negotiations with some of the contracts. When you look at the pension liability, factors that build up that pension are important to understand. If you go to my website, I actually articulate both my solutions for how to deal with public pension, but also the growing OPEB, or other post-employment benefit liability, in addition to fully disclosing those complaints so you can read for them yourself. That's Thomas4Marin.com. But what I would say is that we also need to look at not just the pension liability, but that OPEB. And we do have to look at new ways of being able to not burden our current employees or future employees with a poor market or decisions that we may have made in past contracts. So there's opportunities to actually invest. As Dennis borrowed my statistics before, we have an investment pool of over $600 million that makes 1/10%. I wonder what we could do to empower that. In addition, we have $140 million in reserves. What else could we do? Yeah, I've actually written an article called The Housing Octopus, The Many Tentacles of Marin. You can find it on my website, but I talk about short and long-term rentals. So, one strategy is, do you rent out your room? Yeah, you should rent out your room, and you should be able to have some safety in place as well, because as landlords, and my parents were landlords for some time, renting out a portion of their home, you do have issues, and so people who want to rent out a room need protection as well. So before we go and just carte blanche allow that to occur, we want to make sure that people are going to be protected if they do have issues. In addition, there are other strategies that can be utilized, ordinances that can be passed to help protect both the renters as well as the landlords. In addition, we talk about, many people are talking about infill and being able to build on their property. And we need to be able to make the county more efficient in being able to allow permits. Right now I have contractor friends that are telling me that it takes 2 months to get a very simple project through the county. And if we can't resolve that, we're not going to be able to do these small infill projects as well. I hear a number of people talk about proximity and access and intent, but when you have a federal landlord, the requirement to protect that is for everybody in the United States, not just because you're close to it. So being a military member and somebody who works for the federal government, it's a big machine, and it requires statute and it requires a lot of rules in place. If you want to have flexible, amiable, and accessible government, then you have to have local government that has property to manage. Marin County happens to be a very large landowner, and so maybe we need to shift that access on county lands, because the state parks are going to do what they want to do. And I think, Alex, you just need to contact Dianne Feinstein for the oyster farm. She failed you in 2009, buddy. Well, I'm glad to hear that Dominic and Wendy have adopted my position to make sure that we legislate the federal government. I spoke very adamantly about that. I think that Jared and Dianne have failed Marin County numerous times. I do think that there is other local leadership that's failed the ranchers in leadership positions. I know that at least for the last 4 years, the ranchers have been trying to waive EIR and ask the national parks for those leases. And so we need to elect people that are willing to do the hard things. Legislation is hard. Making sausage is not something most people want to do on their own, but they love to eat it. And so you need to elect people that are willing to muck through that and get through that hard stuff, so that you have those firm rules and you say, look, we as Marin County support the ranchers, which I do. We support diversity, and we support the history of Marin. You told us that we could do it, and now you need to articulate it in the law. And they failed that. So I don't think I'll go further. Thanks.
Tomas.
Well, as I said previously, I fully support the REST program in building a permanent facility, but I do believe they need to expand it. My wife Kim helped the expansion of Homeward Bound. She helped their grant raise for social equity so they can do phase 1 and 2. And it is a compassionate program, but they may be at the extent of where they can potentially serve. They've taken as much property as they can, so we may be at our limits there. I'll tell you personally, I've been homeless twice, and my father, when he had his bouts of dementia before passing away a couple of years ago, found himself on the streets. And thanks to St. Mary's Kitchen in Orange County, he had a comfortable place to stay and safe place until we could locate him, if he ended up there. So I do believe that the county has somewhat failed on a permanent solution, and I want to work on a permanent solution, not only just the county, and I agree with Al. I think we need to look at how we can have a comprehensive program that both looks at a combined program of the county as well as our nonprofits who are successful, like St. Vincent's and the Ritter House. As I talked about, I'm a first-generation American-Lithuanian, and my family has a unique experience in having to come across. In fact, one of my grandfathers passed away in Germany while waiting for his immigration status so he could come to the United States. And I know that the question is about the Latino community, but it's really about immigrants in general and how they are accepted in the United States. How we enforce our laws about occupancy, that's an issue right now in the canal, and the number of vehicles that are there. I did a walkthrough just a few weeks ago, and the number of people that live per square block is unbelievable. And we have to be able to figure out, to work with that community on how we can make more accessible, affordable housing available, but also enforce the rules that are already in place. They're there for a reason, for the safety and security of that those families. And when my grandfather talked about the stories of working in the steel mills and families doing the very same thing, this is 5 decades ago, longer than that, probably 6 decades now, we can change it. So I've lived all over the state of California. I grew up in Orange County. I used to enjoy going with my family through the orange groves and going over to the farmer's market. And you can smell the fresh oranges, and that no longer exists because there are strip malls and homes as far as you can see. Then I moved to the Central Coast, and they did the same thing with San Luis Obispo, and they're starting to continue to expand that valley. I don't know why we have to accept pro-growth. I didn't move here because I want more growth, but it's a necessary evil because you can see it in Sonoma. And that's part of what Dominic alluded to, is the major traffic issues. And we've had decades of failures to see that those are going to be real issues, and then building a system of interconnected trains and transit systems that would move those people, right? So now we're going to open up SMART, but have we talked about moving that train to the east, or ferries from the east to the west, and how we're actually going to move those people around? I'm not supportive of I think it's 3,000 homes, but I'll have to stop.
Mas.
On Friday, I swam from the Golden Gate Bridge to Central San Rafael. It was a 13-mile trip that took me over 6 hours to do. And I did it for two reasons. One, because I wanted to challenge myself and my fitness, but two was because I wanted to raise issues that impact us as Marinites, both traffic and economic. People talk about leadership and commitment, and to do what I had done is just an example of what I'm going to do as Marin County Supervisor. I might not have 20 years of experience working on things, but I get things done. When the president appoints me out to a community, I don't just make sure they have just the bare essentials. I make sure I bring in people who serve that community fully. And that's what I want to do for you as Marin County Supervisor. So you'll get your ballots this week. If you're a voter by mail, please vote for me then. And if you go into the ballot on June 7th, vote for me there. But you'll find me updating all of my thoughts and my articles, both on my website, tomasformarin.com, and on my Facebook page, which has the same moniker, Tomas for Marin.